Yeah.
Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we are joined by one of the most accomplished musicians in jazz today. This gentleman has been on the scene for over 30 years and has worked with many greats from Ron Carter to Art Blakey, Wayne Shorter, David Sanborn, Chris Bodie, Diane Reeves, Christian McBride. I can go on and on. He's worked with everyone. He's prolific. He is a pianist, composer, and arranger, and to date, he's put out over 23 recordings as a leader. It is an honor to have him on the show today. Please welcome the legendary Mr. Geoffrey Keezer.
Hey, no, thank you. It's an honor to be on your show. It's
Thanks,
a great.
thanks so much,
Oh,
man.
this is my
Well, listen,
alarm
let's get
telling me.
into it.
Sorry, let me turn this alarm off.
Sure,
This is
sure.
actually telling me that the Zoom call is starting. So I'm gonna. I can't get through my day without a dozen alarms set
It's a
on my phone and reminders and
Oh yeah, I get the same thing too. Well, listen, man, I'm very interested in knowing more about your humble beginnings. Now, I understand that you're from Wisconsin and
Yeah,
that both of your parents were musicians.
yeah. Eau Claire, Wisconsin,
Okay.
which
Now,
is
were they
about
instrumental in you getting started? I mean, why piano? Why'd you pick piano?
yeah. Um, I started out as a drum. My dad was a drummer, and my mother was a French horn player and sang, and she taught. Dad taught at the college level percussion and drums, and my mom taught originally at home piano lessons and voice lessons and French horn lessons, and then later at as a band director, high school band director. Um, and I kind of was interested in drums first, although I would noodle around at the piano. And it was my dad that taught me how to notate music because when I was about 5 or 6, and I found some of these old after my parents both passed in 2020, where I was going through all the stuff in the house, and I found these little lead sheets or little tunes that I had written that Dad had notated. And I remember him coming in one day, and I said, "Dad, I've got this tune, you know, little thing. Can you write it down for me?" And I guess he got tired after about 3 or 4 of those and said, "I'm going to teach you how to write music, kid." So he actually did. Um, but I was interested. I played drums through high school, and and snare drum and marching band and all that. And um, when I started working as a musician, it was with my dad's band,
Mhm.
a little jazz trio or quartet, and I became the pianist because no one, he was a drummer already. We didn't need two drummers. And
Right.
I like to write my own music and compose. So for me, the piano was, a natural medium to do that on.
Mhm, mhm.
And I just
Now,
sort of became a pianist.
yeah, definitely. During your teenage years, I guess you were playing, gigging. Did you have like local bands that you were involved in,
Just
like
my
high
dad's,
school?
yeah, just my dad's group. I played in the high school in my high school jazz band,
Mhm.
and I also, when I was in a senior in high school, I also played in the college jazz band as well because they needed a pianist and I could do it. So Um, and I've always led my own groups.
Yeah.
I always like being a band leader and a composer and arranger and doing my own thing. So I've done that all along. As I've worked a lot as a side person with so many greats,
Yeah.
I've always tried to maintain my own presence as a band leader as well. You know.
Amazing, amazing. So after high school, you went to college for 1 year at Berkeley. You tried that
Yeah,
for a little bit, right?
yeah, I
Now, I
did.
wanted to
Yeah.
ask you something. When you were after, I guess, the 1 year at Berkeley, how did you meet James Williams? Because he was instrumental in you getting that big gig, I guess, with Art Blakey at age 18.
Yeah, I actually met him right before I went to Berkeley. I met him when I was a senior in high school. The which was called at the time the National Association of Jazz Educators, which later became the International Association of Jazz Educators, which is now GEN, present day
Yeah.
Jazz Education Network. Same group, I think. Um, there was we're talking 1987, 8. There was a mail in thing where you could submit to be chosen as a young talent winner, to
Yeah.
go down to the conference was in Atlanta, Georgia that year. And I got in. Uh, the others in the group of young talent were Roy Hargrove and pianist Stephen Scott
Yeah.
and a bassist named Nathan Berg.
Mhm.
And I can't remember. I feel terrible. I can't remember the drummer's name right now. But they put together a little band of us, and that's you know I mean, that's where I met Roy. We actually became roommates at Berkeley because when I got to Berkeley, I was standing by the mailboxes in the hallway and I saw Roy. I was like, "Hey, you go to school here? It's like, yeah, you too. Okay, cool. And we became roommates because
Wow.
he had a roommate. But the guy was standing in line one day in Boston to buy tickets to a Prince concert, and
Oh,
he was standing on the sidewalk and he got hit by a drunk driver that drove up on the curb and killed this kid.
oh.
So Prince, I suppose, found out about it, and I think he started a scholarship in the kid's name.
Hmm.
But then Roy's, and I didn't like my roommates, so I actually asked him if I could move into his room. So we were roommates for most of the time, most of that year, uh,
That is cool.
which was fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, did James take you maybe
Sorry.
to a
Yeah,
show to
you asked
see
me
Art
about
Blakey?
James.
Oh
I'm
no, it's
sorry.
okay. It's okay, man.
I go off on tangents.
No, please
I
do.
met James at that conference. That's what I was, I think, trying to say before I went off there. But um, I had a couple of his records. There was a little record store in the mall in Eau Claire that had a fairly decent and up to date jazz record section in it. So I remember just buying, I would go there to buy Art Blakey records and buy all the Blue Note reissues and buy whatever was coming out in the 80s bands like Steps Ahead and
Hmm.
um, Weather Report and Chick's Electric Band and all that stuff.
Right.
Great stuff. Art Ensemble of Chicago, you know, whatever was happening.
Yeah.
And I remember picking up a couple of James's records, Progress Report and Alter Ego.
Hmm.
And I had those records and I was already familiar with them. And then I remember coming down the escalator of that, I don't know what it was, a Doubletree hotel or something, and seeing James Williams standing there. And I was like, it's him. I was a kid in a candy store.
Right.
I only knew jazz musicians as they were gods to me. They were unaccessible, unattainable. I didn't know they were real people. Once in a while, somebody would come to Eau Claire and as a clinician, and I met Rufus Reed that way and Ernie Watts.
Great bassist. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'd play with them and work with them, and you'd get a little bit of interaction that way and coaching. But for the most part, and I come down and I see, wow, it's James Williams. And then I saw Dizzy Gillespie, and then I saw Terrence Blanchard and Donald Harrison, and I saw all these cats, and it was holy cow. But I asked him for a lesson, as one does, and he said, "Yeah, if we can find a piano somewhere, I'd be happy to." And I think he called me up about 1 o'clock in the morning and said, "Well, there's a ballroom in the basement of the hotel that has an old beat up upright piano in it. If you don't mind, if you want to come down now, we can do something." So I met him at like 1 a.m. and
Wow.
he asked me to play something, and he told me about Phineas Newborn Jr., the great pianist from Memphis.
A world of piano.
Yeah, and I had never heard of him. He said, "Well, this is someone I think you should really check out." So, of course, when I got home, I went to the record store and I got, I think World of Piano was there. I might have ordered it through the mail. This is all pre-internet.
Right.
You couldn't stream, you couldn't even order. There was no Amazon. There was none of this. You had to go to a record store to buy a
Exactly.
record or get it through the mail. And we would too. I know I sound like that old guy, we used to drive 4 hours in the snow, but we really did drive 4 hours in the snow to go to,
Yeah.
to go to Madison or Minneapolis or wherever to go to the record shops. And it was great because you'd come home with the armload of records and you would sit down with those records. Let's say you bought 4 albums. Those 4 albums became your whole world for the next month or so. And you just listen to the same records over and over. And I talk about this with younger musicians and students sometimes, how the availability of everything for free
Hmm.
is great in a way. I certainly use it when I'm needing to find out about a record or a tune. If I want to learn a tune I don't know, I
Hmm.
go on and I can get 7 or 8 different versions of the tune,
Right.
instrumental versions, vocal versions, and compare and contrast and all that. And it's great. But it also, I don't know what it would be like to be I have a 15-year-old son, but I don't really know what it's like to be a young person now to have access to so much all the time, and how do
Right.
you choose what to focus on,
Yeah.
really. But the thing about that is you don't learn one album as deeply unless you choose to. I have some students that say, sit with this album until I know every note on it, and that's the way we used to do it, and that's
Yeah.
great. But you have to that has to be a concerted effort to do it. It's not the default, you know,
Yeah.
setting. Uh,
But yeah, I was
yeah,
going to ask you more about the working with Art Blakey because you actually were the last, I guess, pianist that worked with him
yeah.
before he passed. I guess did you come after Benny?
After Benny Green,
Yeah, and
I was just
you
there
did a
the last year, 1989 to 1990.
yeah because you did a lot of the writing. You wrote tunes and everything for him. What was it like working with Art Blakey? I mean, what would you say, Geoffrey, your biggest takeaway was working with a giant like him?
Well, one thing I can say is I wish I had been a bit more older and a bit more experienced. A bit
Yeah,
older and a bit more experienced. It was my first real major gig, although I did one tour in Europe with Hargrove right before that. But
yeah,
it was my first true major band. And I was 18 and I had no idea how the social dynamics worked, especially
yeah,
with old crusty jazz cats and
yeah,
all of the lifestyle stuff that goes with that. All, a lot of unhealthy things happening and a lot, and just kind of being around that and going, this isn't, I grew up in a very sheltered, very white, Midwestern, lovely, leave it to beaver kind of environment. And being thrown into this, it was really baptism by fire.
right,
And I didn't really know what to do or how to handle myself very well. But there were guys in the band that were older, like Brian Lynch, who had already been on tour with Horace Silver and Eddie Palmieri, and they were coming from a more experienced stand-up. They were already road dogs. They knew how to do it. You know, but the takeaway from so one thing about Art Blakey, he was a great band leader because he was able to pace the set. Let's say we played 75 minutes. He would pace it in a way that it always had a nice shape to it. I'm trying to I don't know if I'm going up to the left or up to the right on the screen, but it doesn't matter. But it had a nice shape to it. It would have peaks and valleys. It would have elements of surprise, and it always engaged the audience. And he would talk to the audience, which some musicians like to talk to the audience, some don't. I'm more leaning towards breaking that fourth wall now than I used to be. And I like to talk to the audience, especially I feel because if you're playing instrumental music, you have to, you don't have to, but I think it helps to explain a little bit about what it's about. Even if you just say the title of this song is I Took My Dog for a Walk or name of a painting that you like. Just something. Give the audience something to connect with. Otherwise, it's hard enough. The music we play is complex. It's difficult for a lot of people to understand.
yeah,
People, but also we should not dumb it down in any way. In other words,
exactly.
audiences are intelligent. They are. And they understand and they're fans and they're hardcore fans, some of them. And they really know the music. Sometimes they know more about it. They say, well, I remember Lee Morgan was wearing a pink t-shirt on a Tuesday afternoon and he had a cheeseburger for lunch. They know crazy details like that.
Right.
I'm exaggerating, but that's what I mean. But I think it helps to kind of just it helps to break the ice a little bit. I like to go out and just kind of just say this, at least just say this is a song about this,
Yeah.
or I like this song because it reminds me of, or I connect with the lyrics somehow, or I was whatever the story is that goes with it, and I try not to talk a show into the ground, but and get but
Exactly.
I think it helps anyway.
Yeah.
And Art Blakey was great at that. He was great at connecting with the audience. He was funny. He had a sense of humor, and and he could tell we didn't play just one show. It wasn't like a Broadway show that was the same set list night after night after night. We had certain points we would put in Monin or we put in Blues March,
Mhm.
but the actual tunes rotated quite a bit. The set list rotated, and it was never predetermined. We wouldn't go out and say this is the set list. Now band leaders we write set lists. We send out MP3s and Dropboxes and PDFs, and we kind of hold in the hands of our side people in make it. Of course, the caveat with that is Art Blakey had work. Like he had consistent. We were playing every night. When I was out with Ray Brown, we played 250 nights a year.
Mm,
Art Blakey the same way. And so the expectations of the musicians in the band could be different. You could say, you could ask the musicians in your band to memorize the show, memorize all 70 or 80 tunes in the book or whatever it was.
mhm.
Now it's different now when you have just one gig and you've got to put a band together. It's not really fair to ask them to have everything memorized and to have that same level of commitment. You want them to bring the energy and learn the music and do the homework, and bring their A game, of course, at all times. But um, Art would say, like, in the set list, you could see if the audience was sort of, maybe they're starting to lose interest. Maybe we played too many new tunes and they want to hear a hit. So it's okay,
Right.
go into Blues March. He'd play
Or
Moanin',
moaning or something. Yeah.
something that people knew.
Yeah.
And so that was a good thing to observe, a good quality, band leader quality to observe. And just on a general energy level, he gave, and he was dying of cancer the whole year I was in the band, but he gave every bit of energy and every ounce that he had to the music
Yeah.
when he got up on the drums. Whether and sometimes he really wasn't feeling good, but he still, he might have been sleeping 23 hours a day, but that 1 hour he was on stage,
He gave it his
it
all.
was a
Yeah.
hurricane, man. It was incredible.
That is incredible to
Yeah.
work with someone like him. You also toured and worked with late trumpeter Art Farmer. What was it like
Yeah.
working with him?
So playing with Art Farmer came almost immediately after Art Blakey's
Really?
that gig ended, and also by way of James Williams. James introduced me to Art Blakey and to Art Farmer
Oh,
too.
James Williams.
James was working with Art Farmer, and he had been in the band for about 4 or 5 years, and he was ready to move on. So he introduced me to Art, and I auditioned for him up in Boston at the Regatta Bar, and it was completely the opposite. The way I, like, we talk about comping
Yeah.
in piano, jazz piano, comping mean accompanying, and the way, and so with Art Blakey, it'd be kind of like kind of big. Like you had to play big to keep up with that. Just
Right.
his volume and his energy level. You had to give it a lot. And Art Farmer was sort of like almost the opposite. It was, I used to say, it felt like playing with a vocalist. It was much more. Now that doesn't mean that vocalists are soft and flimsy or weak or anything like that. I mean, you play with a vocalist like Diane Reeves. It's like playing with Coltrane or Art
Yeah.
Blakey or something. It's big and powerful, right? Although there are moments where you also, there's sensitive moments too. But the point being, Art's thing was like, oh, I really have to listen in a different way. I have to approach accompanying in a very different way. And so it was really good for me to do. And also, I want to say that I sought out these apprenticeship kinds of opportunities
Yeah.
at the expense of not playing with my peers so much. There were a lot of cool scenes happening in New York, late 80s, 90s. There was all kinds of neat stuff going on. There was the Brooklyn stuff, the M bass, the stuff that Jerry Allen and Steve
Right.
Coleman
Steve
and Robin
Coleman. Right.
Eubanks, all those, Greg Osby. Like there was a lot of really neat stuff going on. There was some, really interesting fusion stuff happening, like the kind of stuff that John Scofield was doing, or like Bill Laswell, Sonny Sharrock, like all that was happening. But I wanted to play straight ahead, and I wanted to make sure that I played with my heroes, and I had a sense they
I
wouldn't
was
be
about to
around
say something
forever.
about that,
Yeah,
which is incredible to me, Jeffrey. You were very blessed and lucky to play with
yeah,
a lot of these masters while they were still around. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of the young kids today, I mean, playing with J.J. Johnson, Dizzy Gillespie, I mean, that's incredible. And you had that opportunity. Art Blakey,
yeah,
I guess you're one of the youngest pianists I think to ever work with him. You and Benny, I believe you
yeah.
may be the youngest.
I
And
probably am, yeah, because I got in just at the tail end. I was really
yeah,
glad I did, but it was weird for a while there. every band I was in, somebody would die. It was like every time I would join a band, somebody would die, and it was,
Wow.
of course, just age and time and lifestyle stuff. But I just felt like this sucks. It's great, but I got to play with a lot of great people, and really, I do feel very, very blessed, very fortunate, and lucky to be both both prepared and ready for the gigs, but also in the right place at the right time with the right
Mhm.
connections. I think both of those things go into it.
Most definitely. What was that? I'm trying to remember that group. You were touring with a group of pianists. I believe it was Mulgrew Miller, Harold Mayburn. That was really something, man. What was it like working with those giants? I think it was like 4 or 5 of you
hmm
guys.
That was James Williams's project,
Yeah,
the contemporary piano ensemble.
yeah,
It
exactly.
was Mayburn, Mulgrew, James, Donald Brown, and myself.
Wow.
And Donald and I are the only ones still
That's what I'm
living.
saying. The only ones exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that's
that was
amazing.
James's project. It was something that he put together with John Poses, a concert promoter down in Columbia, Missouri,
Hmm.
and John organized with the Yamaha company to give us four matching grand pianos, which we took on the road with us. They put them in a truck every night and drove them to the next venue. You know, it was pretty neat. We were like the Dave Matthews Band or something. We
Yeah,
had like our own
exactly.
gear and everything. It was neat. Um, but that was really, really special. And the idea of playing with four pianists and trying to figure out how to arrange that music so it's not just 88 keys times four all the time. I'm not sure what the math even is on that, but when to sort of sit back, when to not play, when to maybe, if someone's playing low, maybe somebody else plays high. Someone plays really full, maybe someone else plays thin. Just ways to figure that whole puzzle out.
Yeah.
And everybody wrote for the band, and we all pretty much, whenever Mulder Miller would play, we all pretty much just were quiet. It's like that one uncle or somebody at the dinner table that they don't say a whole lot, but when they speak, everyone is like, when E.F. Hutton speaks, you're old enough to remember the E.F. Hutton commercials. But James Williams used to call Mulgrew. He said Mulgrew Miller was the state of the art of jazz piano,
Wow. Yeah,
and
you guys had a really good relationship too, you and Mulgrew. Yeah.
yeah,
I've seen a
yeah,
lot of photos of the two of you together.
yeah. I mean, he was kind of a friend, but more of a hero than anything
Yeah.
else. And man, I can't. It's hard to believe that they're not still here. They're certainly the age where they could be, but
Yeah.
circumstances.
I wanted to ask you about one of my favorite musicians who's still with us. You got an opportunity to play with them, and I'm talking about Wayne Shorter. I believe it
Yeah.
wasn't Danilo Perez hurt or sick or something at the time, and you filled in for some gigs or something like
It
that.
was, yeah, I did three gigs in 2009. Danilo, I believe he was in Panama and he was playing football with his kids and he broke his ankle or something happened like that, but he wasn't able to travel. And so uh, I was playing at the Playboy Jazz Festival in the Hollywood Bowl with a unfortunately a comedian who shall not be named, um, who fancied himself a jazz musician from time to time. But
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking
I
about.
was there, and then Wayne needed a piano player for the next night, so John Patitucci and Blade both threw my name in the hat, and I have to say that this is another very good example of being in the right place at the right time, but also being prepared. I was so for me to play with Wayne Shorter, he's my hands down favorite human being. First of all, on the whole planet, he's my hero, favorite human being, really favorite musician ever. And as a kid, I grew up listening to Weather Report. As a teenager, I was transcribing. I had Phantom Navigator and
Oh,
Atlantis and Joyrider. All those tunes, they just got just sewn into my DNA. They really did. And so it was always my dream to play with Wayne Shorter. Always, always, always. And so when this opportunity came up, I, um, I was ready for it. I knew the tunes already. And Wayne is so gracious. He calls and he says, we can just play free for an hour. He doesn't Wayne's like so not attached to anything. And he go, or do you know Footprints? I'm like, Mr. Shorter. I said, I got you. Whatever you want to play, I
Right.
got all your new records. I know the arrangements. I had made charts for everything. And I still have them in a file downstairs.
You just
And
made me
yeah.
think of something that's so funny. I'm sure you've heard the story. When Miles first, got Wayne into the band, he says to Wayne, he says, "Hey, do you know my stuff?" And Wayne says, "Yeah." And Miles is like, "Uh-oh, you must be bad." But yeah,
Yeah.
thinking about all that great music that he wrote for the quintet in the 60s. But Art Blakey said something about Wayne. He says he was the only musician that had like 3 degrees or something like that that he worked with. How brilliant he was. The stuff that he was writing was just
Oh
just
yeah.
knocked him out.
Now here's something really interesting about Wayne. Now this really blew my mind. Now, the sort of idea of linear development, evolution of someone's musical style, and you listen to Wayne's early stuff from the late 50s, and they're tunes, some sort of interesting harmonic movement, and then as it progresses through later Blakey stuff, and then Miles, the tunes get more and more interesting harmonically, and then Weather Report, they start to become, and then into his later stuff, his 80s and 90s era stuff, starts to become more longer form pieces, more like sort of everything written out, through composed, as they say, all this
Mhm.
kind of stuff, and on to the operas and symphonies and stuff that he's writing now.
Right.
But he has this song called Prometheus Unbound, which is which is what I thought was a relatively new piece, but by the way it sounds, it's a long thing. It's 12 pages. The piano part is 12 pages long.
Mhm.
Every note written out. He was playing it with the quartet with Danilo and John and Brian, and uh, and it's on record. It's on that Emanon album.
I
The
think I
one,
have that in
yeah,
my
yeah.
in the basement.
So
Yeah.
so it sounds like fully, like completely modern new Wayne music. When he sent me the chart, I looked at it and it says copyright 1952. He
Wow.
wrote it in 1952 before any of that other stuff happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really
Jeffrey, he's
incredible.
also inspired by movies. He's a big movie
Yeah.
buff,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think that's where he gets a lot of his inspiration from, some of the things that he
Absolutely.
watches. But that's incredible. 1952, I did not know that.
And it makes
Wow.
sense because it's really like it's a contemporary classical composition from almost from that era.
Hmm.
Schoenberg and Bartok and
Yeah,
the stuff that was the stuff that was happening then.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I'm blown away. Tell me about some of the duets projects that you worked on. I know you did something with Chick, the late Chick Corea, who we lost back in 2021. What was it like working with Chick Corea?
Chick, it almost like can't even say was. Chick feels like so still
Yeah.
present in such a huge way. Um, I got this idea in 2003 to record an album of Hank Jones's music. Hank was one of my biggest heroes,
Yeah.
and I got to know him a little bit. Had a couple of nice conversations with him, and I would always go see him play whenever I could, and sit right here, right like at the edge of the piano, and just be, we're watching.
Yeah.
Um, but I got this idea that I wanted to make a tribute record to him while he was still living, and also bring attention to his own compositions because not a lot of people know how prolific of a composer he was. So I
Hmm.
called the album, it's on the Telarc label, it's called Sublime, honoring
Yeah.
the music of Hank Jones. And I wanted to do it as piano duets with some of my favorite pianists. So I got Kenny Barron and
Ah,
Mulgrew and Benny Green. And I emailed Chick's office and I said, is there any way I can get Chick interested in this project? And Chick wrote back right away. He said, Jeff, I'd love to do it. My only two uh, conditions are that number one, you make my name the same size as everybody else's on the cover because he's had experiences where people would say featuring Chick Corea and try to sell it as Chick's project or something.
right.
And number two, would you be willing to come down to Florida to my house to record? And I went like, I'll be there yesterday. And it was great. He had two big pianos in his living room, and Bernie Kirsch, his longtime engineer, was there to
Yeah.
record it. And it was just a great hang. We hung out for a whole day, and went out to Chick and Gail and I went out to Olive Garden or somewhere, I think, for dinner. It was beautiful, you know? Yeah.
Great, man. That's incredible that you had that opportunity to work with him. Now, I wanted to ask you about your latest recording because you put out solo pieces. I remember you put out a solo recording, which I still have. But this new recording of yours, man, Playdate. Tell me about that. What is that about? What are you trying to say on this recording? You got one of my buddies, by the way, on there too, Richie Goods Faces.
Yeah.
But tell me about this recording, man.
So the idea came about, of course, during COVID. Uh, I had gotten into doing a lot of writing for people for hire, string arrangements. So
Yeah.
Shedrick Mitchell, the organist, pianist, a great pianist too, but he plays organ on my record. Um, I got into thing during COVID where we were writing. I was writing a lot of string charts for him for his own projects and projects he was producing for other artists, and he started to really like my string writing. So we would conduct sessions over Zoom. You know, they'd be in there, the strings with masks on and everything, and I'd be on the box on an iPad or something.
Mhm.
Um, and also for Richie Goods, and I was writing for the Baylor Project as well on their record Generations. We did a couple tunes on there.
Yeah.
Uh, but somewhere towards around the end of I mean, middle of 2021, I got the itch to really want to play. And I
Yeah.
said, I like being a writer. That's neat. Being an arranger, that's cool. That's a skill set I have, and I can work and use it. But you know, I want to play piano, and I want to play with my friends and my colleagues. So I simply just got this idea. I booked a studio, a day in the studio, and I thought it would just be, oh, let's just get together and have an easy Blue Note style blowing session, just play some easy tunes and have some fun. And as everything I do, as David Sanborn says, turns into a bloated fiasco. So, you know, $40,000 later, I've got an 18-piece string section and harp and French horns, and we're recording and overdubbing all this stuff. Well, that's Shedrick's fault because Shedrick kept saying, "Man, you got to write some strings. You got to put some strings on this, bro." I said, "Oh, I don't know." He said, "Oh, come on." So he encouraged me to put strings on it and kind of expand it a little bit. But that was it. The play date. I have a kid who's 5, and that's how we would get our children
I've
together to
seen I've
play.
seen the photos, man, on your page.
Yeah,
You handsome young little fella. Yeah, I
yeah.
saw
Thank
your
you.
your Facebook page. Yeah,
But that's the only way we could get our kids together is we'd have to book these play dates.
yeah.
Next
That's
Saturday at
that's
2 o'clock. Let's meet here. And so I called it that because that was really just the idea was just getting friends together and on a playground or a sandbox and just having some fun. And then the cover, the artist who did the cover,
yeah.
Gordon C. James, he writes these beautiful children's books, and we have a book called "I'm Every Good Thing"
Hmm.
that we're reading to our son. And one night I was sitting there reading it to him, and I went, God, this is a beautiful book. I wonder if I can get this guy. I don't know him at all. I wonder if I can just find him and get him to do my album cover
Yeah,
because he draws children, And I thought, what if I could get him to draw us, everybody on the record, as kids? And that's sort of the cover, right? So I sent him photos of us, and he agreed to do it right away. And it turns out, of course, we know some of the same people, and we have mutual
yeah.
friends, and he's from the D.C. area. He's from Silver Spring, and but and he lives down in North Carolina somewhere now. So anyway, it turned out to be really neat, and it was his first time doing an album cover too. So
It's a nice cover, man.
yeah,
It's
thank
definitely a
you.
nice cover.
Yeah.
You just brought up a name, and I was thinking about that when I was looking at your background. Tell me about David Sanborn. How did you hook up with him? I was just curious. I said this is interesting because I said I'm seeing in David and Jeffrey's background, I'm seeing all these jazz masters, and then Jeffrey's playing with David Sanborn. And don't get me wrong, I love David Sanborn. It's funny. So listening to an interview with him, and he says, "I am not a jazz musician." He said, "There's a lot of guys passing themselves off as jazz musicians." He says, "I have elements of jazz in my music," because he likes Hank Crawford and a lot of other players, but the blues, but
Sure.
he doesn't consider
Cannonball
himself
and
a
yeah.
jazz. But
Yeah.
tell me, how'd you hook up with David?
David, well, most of the music I've played with him is not the funky smooth jazz stuff. Anyway, he's really now he's got a quintet with Michael Dees, trombone, and Ben Williams and Billy Kilson.
Yeah.
and myself, and we're doing mostly straight ahead stuff. That's where his head is at now. He wants to do that.
Yeah.
Not really swinging, but it's like it's not Chicago song and
I
all
know what
that.
you're saying. Exactly. Yeah.
Although sometimes we do that stuff too, but that's like a different band, you know, electric gigs and acoustic gigs. But
Yeah.
we met in I think around 2005. I don't even remember exactly how.
Hmm.
But I did one tour with him then, and then I've been working with him again now on and off since like 2017. But he's great.
Yeah,
He's
he is.
just
David is great. He's been out there for a long time. He's played with
incredible,
everybody.
and what a mind, you know. And he can sit there and talk to you about anything
Hmm. Hmm.
at length. He's incredibly well read and smart and into a lot of different stuff. You know,
Yeah,
he's a cool
great player
guy.
he is.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask you, Jeffrey, if I were to come over to your house right now and sit down with you, and we listen to some music, what is Geoffrey Keezer listening to? What artist or what inspires you? Who are you listening to these days?
Oh, what did I have on my phone? I was just listening to this morning. I was listening to Jen Shu. She's really interesting. Shyu.
Hmm.
Um, and then it was an album called Zero Grasses. And then
Okay.
I've been kind of getting into Charles Lloyd
Oh
this
yeah,
week,
Charles is great.
mostly because I follow him on Facebook, and I'm kind of like going, well, he's someone that I've certainly heard over and listened to over the years, but never really done a deep dive into. So now that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, interesting.
uh,
Okay.
what else? I mean, this is like a question where I can look through my phone and see what's on there. No, I had all kinds of stuff for my kid. So there's like children's music on here. I got into the Seeds on the Ground by
Okay.
Airto. Some
Uh,
early 70s
you know,
stuff.
I'm good friends with Flora Parim. I talk to Flora all the time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Uh Caroline, I was listening to Caroline Davis.
Hmm.
We just did a gig at Mesro, Caroline and Nearfelder.
You know something that I loved? I saw that gig with just you and Ron Carter last year. Man, that was
Yeah.
fantastic. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that
I'm
was a
sitting
real
here
bucket
looking at you
list
guys,
moment.
and you guys were swinging. I'm like, Ron, I said, this guy is 85 years old. The way he holds that bass and the way he still plays, Ron, he's so youthful, but you guys were rolling. I watched that show all the time on YouTube. I said, look at Jeffrey, he's swinging. You know, that's a good show.
He's he's still at the top of his game.
He
He's
is, and you know, I sat down and interviewed him, and Jeffrey, this guy, when I was talking to him, I says, you know, you have over what 2,500 recordings. He said, well, Preston, he said that's actually old. It's well over 3,000. And he was just going back telling me how he worked with Monk,
oh
all of
yeah.
these people. I mean, he's played with every major jazz artist pretty much for the last 60, 65 years. I mean, it's unbelievable. But that show with the
Yeah.
two of you is that's pretty special. You guys were
And
rolling.
outside of jazz too. I mean the Brazilian stuff and
Oh
he's
yeah.
he's on a lot of pop records. I mean
Yeah. I
he's
mean,
on
what, a
everything.
Tribe Called Quest, and he's played
Yeah.
with all these different
Yeah.
artists. Well, listen, I want to do an interesting segment with you. And since you're a pianist, we're going to talk about some pianists. I'm going to just name a pianist, and I just want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind. If you feel like playing or saying anything, go for it. We're going to start with James P. Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can't sit down and play Carolina Shout for you, but I mean, that's I don't know what can you say. These are foundations. He's the really the building block of everything, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, for
yeah,
sure. Next name, Willie the Lion Smith.
yeah. I mean, same thing. All those Harlem Stride Cats.
Hmm.
I mean, Fats Waller, I think, was probably the most technically gifted of all of them. I mean, stride piano is like a whole. I'm not very good at it, I had to learn one Mary Lou Williams piece called "Nightlife"
Yeah,
for a Lincoln Center concert about a decade ago,
yeah.
and I was sweating bullets, man. It's a very difficult piece, but she was in there. Duke Ellington was an incredible stride pianist. So was Count Basie,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and the thing about Basie is, he's kind of minimalist later on, later years, and but all that stuff he was doing with his right hand, all that stuff. That's just the right hand part of a stride style. All that stuff. He just kind of took the left hand out and just kept the right hand in.
Hmm.
You know.
Next name, probably a personal favorite of mine, Bud Powell.
Yeah. Well, so again, so Bud is known as the sort of originator of bebop piano or the bebop piano style, and again, this is one of these things. This so when we talk about evolution in this timeline of jazz,
Yeah,
and it's never quite as simple as people would like to make it. And it's the same thing when you talk about human evolution and
hmm,
migrations of populations and things. And they keep digging up skeletons that are 100,000 years old that shouldn't be in this place because that doesn't fit the narrative that we're all used to, right? And so certain musicians in this music like Art Tatum and Ellington, to me they transcend the whole timeline because they're doing stuff way 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 back that is just as modern as anything that ever
exactly.
happened since. And so they're sort of outside of it, you know, outside of this progression from, let's say, New Orleans style Dixieland jazz through swing era through
Hmm.
bebop, post bop, hard bop, whatever, 60s, and then fusion, and then blah blah blah, on and on and on. Um, it's not quite that simple. So with Bud Powell, even though he was known as someone who he kind of removed the left hand, a lot of the stride elements, there's a bunch of tunes where he's playing stride on the Genius of Bud Powell, the solo piano
Hmm.
recordings from the 40s. Like he's striding all over this stuff. Monk too. Monk could
Yeah,
stride
I
like
was about
crazy.
to mention Monk as well, both
Yeah,
of those guys. Yeah,
yeah. So really, they were still very connected to what came before.
yeah, yeah, no question.
Yeah,
Another name I was about to name, you very rarely hear this guy's name, great player, Sonny Clark.
yeah. Well, Sonny Clark, he's a great pianist to teach to when students are wanting to get, Sonny Clark and Red Garland too, in terms of the single line stuff that they do, because it's
Hmm.
very clear. I'm not saying it's easy or not to minimize in any way what they played,
Right.
but I'm just saying it's a little bit compared to Bud Powell, for example. It's a little bit easier to hear. It's a little bit just more. It's a little bit simpler, sort of in a way. Still profound and great music. But Bud, Bud will tend to do a lot of double time stuff, and it sounds
Yeah.
like, like a tornado just started up or
Yeah,
something.
for
And
sure.
that's hard for beginning pianists to grasp some of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Next name, Bill Evans.
So Bill Evans, I think I have more of an appreciation for him now as I get older, and he's still not my favorite pianist. But that's my opinion. So
I like your opinion.
he's
That's
a lot
good.
of people's favorite pianist, and that's okay too.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but I certainly love his harmonic sense and the inner voicings and kind of movement he does. It's beautiful stuff. It's orchestrated in a way on the
Yeah.
piano. Um, I He wasn't someone that I was really into a lot ever growing up or when I was learning the music because I just preferred stuff with a little bit more groove to it.
Oh, I know. I
You
got you.
know, that was
Yeah.
just and I can't imagine someone like I can't. Bill played with Miles, but I can't imagine Bill playing with Art Blakey or just in that
I know
heavy
what you're
swing
saying.
thing. So I just needed a little more funk and
Yeah,
soul kind of in
definitely.
the music I wanted to play.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Next name, Herbie Nichols.
Herbie Nichols. I did a tune of his called uh, I can't remember the name of the tune. There's a tribute. It was called 23. It was called 23 Skidoo,
Uh,
and he's not a pianist that I really got into deeply.
mhm.
I can appreciate it, but he's sort of like Herbie Nichols, Elmo Hope, and
Yeah.
kind of Andrew Hill in a way too. They're sort of like a little bit peripheral. I'm probably going to piss some people off, but I have to be able to say something and at
No,
least have some
please.
kind
Yeah.
of opinion about something in the world. So They seemed like they're really interesting. They're very interesting, almost kind of avant-garde or going
Mhm.
towards the avant-garde. And I remember when I got assigned a Herbie Nichols tune um, for this Blue Note project. It was Bob Belden was producing it, and
Mhm.
I was going through a bunch of his tunes, and I just was having a really hard time connecting with any of them. And I called up Rini Rosnes, and I said, Rini, I don't know what to do. They told me I have to pick a Herbie Nichols tune, and I just can't seem to find anything that I really. And she said, "Does it give you the heebie-jeebies?" Kind of, but like of course sure I can dig it.
Yeah,
It's cool.
cool.
Yeah,
Next name. This next gentleman is probably my personal favorite, and I hear a lot of his playing in you, McCoy Tyner.
yeah, of course. McCoy. So I heard McCoy. I got to see him play live when I was 15,
Mhm.
and Mulgrew Miller the same year, and they were two of my already from listening biggest piano heroes.
Mhm.
But it was seeing them play. McCoy came to Minneapolis, which was about an hour and a half from where I grew up. And I remember driving up there with my dad, and he had that trio with Avery Sharp and Louis Hayes
That's
on
right.
drums. And I already knew how McCoy played. I had his records, but seeing him play and hearing him in person was a completely different experience. And it made such a huge impression on me. It was what made me want to play to be a pianist professionally.
Yeah, they said he's the
Seeing those
most
two.
influential pianist of the last 60 years. Herbie and Chick talked about McCoy and with the fourths, how he was really important with with the fourths that he helped develop. But yeah, McCoy is special. I tell this story all the time, Geoffrey. Everyone's heard it over and over, but I have a rare TV interview with Freddie Hubbard, and he's being interviewed. And the guy says, Freddie, you played with a lot of great pianists. You played with Herbie Hancock, you played with McCoy. He said, what's the difference between these guys? And Freddie says, oh, Herbie's great. He plays synthesizers and he's got a nice touch. He said, but when it comes to the natural thing, acoustic music, he says, McCoy Tyner is my man. He says, playing with McCoy Tyner is like playing with three piano players. you know,
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's
it was good.
great. And he was I got to know him a bit, and he was a really nice guy. And this is another point I think I want to make is what really made me want to do this
Yeah.
for my life's work was not only loving the music, but also meeting so-called jazz musicians and just seeing the incredible humanity and kindness in all these people. Once in
Mhm.
a while, you meet someone, they say never meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed. But for me, meeting my heroes hardly ever was let down. It was always like, wow,
Yeah.
you know, McCoy was really nice. Cedar Walton was really nice to me. I even met Count Basie once when I was a kid.
Wow.
He was in a wheelchair. I was maybe 10 years old, and I remember him being like really nice and just like, hello, young man. You know, Herbie Hancock, when I was 18 years old, I went to see Herbie at the Blue Note. He was playing with this group with Buster Williams and Al Foster.
Right.
And I had met him once before, so he sort of had an idea who he was. But I remember running up to him right as he walked down the steps off the stage. He used to be the steps were like right behind the piano, not through the middle of the audience as they are now. But anyway, he was just coming off the piano, and I ran up to him, and he was already engaged in about six conversations at once. And Herbie can do this. He can carry on six conversations at the same time. She did really? No kidding. About 4 o'clock tomorrow. Yeah, right. What do you think about? And he's going around like this, and I caught him. I was like, Mr. Hancock, Mr. Hancock. Hey, how you doing? I said, and I was bold too. I had not just one question, but I had three questions ready for Herbie. Three. And I said, okay, can I ask you three quick questions? He's like, okay. I go, okay, what are the correct chord changes on the last four bars of Dolphin Dance?
Yeah. Yeah.
That part. And he showed me. Well, no, this is the second part of the story. And I said, and what's the real turnaround on footprints? Not the one in the real book, but what is it really supposed to be? And and I said, what is that chord, that voicing on Eye of the Hurricane? That one. And he goes, oh. And he had only been off stage for about 5 minutes, And people, you know how the Blue Note is. People are leaving and paying their bills, and it's crowded and getting their coats and stuff. He takes me right. He walks right back up on stage and sits down at the piano and gives me a 10-minute, for all intents and purposes, private lesson.
Wow.
Just he just finished play. He could have been like, kid, I'm not. I just came off stage and I got to go to my dressing room.
Right.
He shows me all this stuff. It was incredible, and he tells me how he came up with this voicing and that voicing, and where what he was doing at the time, and where he was living, and and gave me all this philosophy about how he thinks about. I was blown away.
Wow.
And a couple years ago, I went to see him and Chick play duet piano, and when they were touring it, the last one they did, and I said, Herbie, I know you're not going to remember this. This was a long time ago, but I told him the story, and I was practically in tears telling him the story. I said that the kindness and generosity that you gave to me when I was an 18-year-old kid, like I've carried that with me my whole life, and I try to do the same. You know, I was like I want to have a bumper sticker on my car that says, "What would Herbie do?" You know, he's that kind of cat,
Yeah.
and 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 Herbie and Chick was like that too. And they would show you, McCoy was a really nice guy, and he was very complimentary, but he's a little more reserved. He wouldn't talk a whole lot about music. But Herbie and Chick both will get up there and just show you anything. And the reason was they were never afraid that you would steal their stuff because they knew they could come up with something new. They could show you what they did yesterday or five
Yeah.
minutes ago, but it didn't matter because
Both are so brilliant, Geoffrey.
yeah.
What'd you think of Keith Jarrett?
I appreciate Keith. I think he's a very influential pianist. Not my favorite.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like his attitude. I don't like the whole,
You're
you
not the
know,
only person that said
yeah,
that.
yeah. Um, but certainly made a lot of great records, and everybody in Europe wants to play like Keith,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I got one last name for you, Mr. Kenny Barron.
Ooh, I love Kenny Byrne, and another really, really nice guy.
Yeah.
Beautiful cat. Kenny still hangs. He's like 80 or something. He'll
Something like
still,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
he'll still come out to just, hear music, and oh, it's great. And it was so much fun playing with him on that Sublime album too. You know, love Kenny Byrne.
I sort of look at you, not like some of the younger generation of pianists, like Jason Moran and some of the other ones who are great. But
Ooh, bravo.
yeah, Jason's great. And Mark Carey. There's so many wonderful pianists. But I was just thinking about,
Helen Sung.
oh, Helen is
Helen Sung.
fantastic. You like Cyrus Chestnut too?
Yeah, yeah. Cyrus is great. Cyrus, Connie Hahn
Yeah.
too. You know,
Man, there's so many, but
man.
I put you in that class with the Chicks and the Herbies and the McCoys, man, because
Oh,
you've been out there for a while. You've done it all. You play with everyone, and you just have a night. I mean, when I was watching you play one of your videos, I says, man, he's got that McCoy time. I was just watching your hand, and I'm like, man, he's got that down. How you incorporated that in your playing, and it was I was very impressed, man.
oh,
Because like I said,
thank
I've
you.
seen all the pianists. I've studied them. I'm a former musician myself, and you are right there with the greats, man. And
Oh,
I just
thank
want
you
to
so
thank you
much.
today for being on Jazz Talk. You're a wonderful human being. It's just a pleasure sharing this time and space with you. Hang on, I'm about to close out the show.
Yeah.
Well, you've heard it from the great Geoffrey Keezer. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.